We've seen a lot of emerging trends, specifically post-COVID, with consumers being driven towards e-commerce. The popularity of online sales meant that gone are the days of queuing outside flagship stores. Now we've seen a shift towards virtual queuing and a lot of demand in the virtual e-commerce space. And that means that protecting server load, site reliability, product availability from scalper bots and other automated attacks becomes a lot more imperative.
While retailers put a lot of effort into preparing, making sure they've got enough supplies to meet demand and that sort of thing, we also see attackers preparing in a very similar capacity and very similar fashion.
When goods are on sale for bargain prices, there's opportunities there for people to monetize them, snapping up the latest bargains so they can flip those products in marketplaces, be able to sell them on in resale markets.
Scalping attack typically involves scalper bots. So this is when scripts will add items to their basket very, very quickly and complete the checkout journey as quickly as possible in order to gain as much inventory as possible.
People often say to me, do retailers really care if their products are scalped? If your business gets a reputation as somewhere where real people can't actually ever buy things and they always have to rely on the secondary market, that's not great. They want to maintain their reputation as a good business to buy from.
If you think this item is selling really well because we've lowered the price, we've got loads of customers, you might not realize you're actually selling it to scalpers. And these scalpers are reselling it somewhere else. You might order in a lot of stock to account for the demand that you appear to have for this item, and you might lower other items and so forth in the same way. And the scalpers might suddenly decide, I'm not making money off this the way I want to, and suddenly stop buying, and you're left with loads of stock you're going to struggle to shift.
A lot of the focus from bots used to be on the very, very high ticket items, whereas now what we're quite often seeing with the kind of rise of secondary markets is that everyday items can quite often be scalped. If the discount being offered is such that they can easily be resold, it's a much lower margin of entry for that bot and that market, and a much less risk involved with these lower ticket items. So we're seeing a much, much broader range of products being attacked by bots these days than we were before.
One of the other attacks we've seen developing more and more recently is what we call freebie bots. They're constantly scanning all the item listings on various retailers, often hundreds of retailers at a time. So sometimes when retailers upload new items to their online catalogs, they will mistakenly upload them at some sort of £0 or $0 price point. And these scrapers, their job is basically to identify where this happens and then buy as many as they can at that price point as possible, so that the attacker can basically build up a massive supply of them and sell them on later. Even if you sell them then it's at, say, 50 cents, you're making a significant sum of money, and it can be really quite painful to retailers when this happens. I've spoken to a couple of retailers who lost over thousands of items of inventory in this way in just a few minutes.
I think it's become cheaper and easier than ever for bad actors to purchase and deploy scripts. This makes attacks more complex, more frequent as well. We're seeing criminal organizations become more professional over time. Some of these organizations have HR departments. They're that well organized.
It used to be that bots were entirely bespoke scripts written against certain targets. Nowadays, they're a lot more commodified. It's much easier for a user interested in executing a bot attack to get their hands on an application that'll do it for them.
There's a big multi-billion-dollar industry for people building the tooling and platforms to enable other people to do attacks. So what we see much more now is that the attacks are not end-to-end by one person or one group. They are a number of groups who are doing a part of an attack, and they then make the results of that attack available to other groups to take on the next stage of the attacks.
More and more we see retailers becoming targets of these criminal organizations. And I think over coming years, with the rise of AI, these attacks are going to be easier to execute and much, much cheaper, as I mentioned earlier. As a result, businesses are going to be forced to use dynamic toolkits such as Netacea, because, the legacy trend of rules-based approach and, manually mitigating these kinds of attacks, it won't hold up to the sophistication of what we're seeing in the industry today.
So attackers are preparing for Black Friday by doing a couple of things. One, they're setting up, getting ready for their attack. So they're acquiring tooling. It's worth noting that this ecosystem is very professionalized now. It's not like one person doing the whole thing end to end. You have different specialists at each stage of the attack. Would say one person actually doing the attack, but they'll buy a tool off someone else or information off someone else. So we see things like monitoring services and tools that simply scrape hundreds of retailers around the world and say, this item is 20% below RRP on this site. We recommend buying it from this site and selling it on this site. And so attackers are acquiring the tools that will do that, doing the analysis where they have to in order to maximize their profits. Again, more and more tools are actually doing all of that analysis for them. But simply the attackers are basically doing their research, getting their tools, and getting ready to actually launch the attack because they're anticipating some good deals on Black Friday that they can buy low and, as I said before, sell high later on. Some of the more advanced groups will typically do their own targeting. These ones typically have data scientists on board who do analysis of various products, what they think is likely to come down. Some groups have those teams sort of in-house, if you will. Other groups essentially just provide that data to other groups. You can quite literally just buy a tool that will scrape hundreds of retailers' websites, looking at what products are in stock, what the prices are, and what it will do is it will compare the same item across hundreds of retailers and say, it's worth this much on this retailer and this much on this retailer. This amount is more than this amount, so you should buy from this retailer and sell it on this store at a markup. If you buy, say, £1,000 worth of this good from this store and sell all £1,000 on this store, you will make, say, £1,500 profit.
These big events often lead to criminal organizations wanting to test out a lot of their credential lists that they're buying off of the dark web. And they see it as a great opportunity to kind of hammer identity endpoints with username and passwords to try and find what works and what doesn't. If you find that pair and you crack the code, that's going to be very, 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 very valuable for these attackers.
Under BAU type traffic conditions, we'll often see attacks like account takeover and carding and all those kinds of things. They'll happen on a very low and slow basis in order to evade detection. Whereas when you've got heightened levels of traffic on the site, some of those attacks can become more volumetric because businesses aren't necessarily expecting to be monitoring quite so closely because they're expecting to see increased levels of traffic. The number one concern, I think, is actually that no legitimate traffic is affected by any security measures that they have in place to protect the site.
It's all about, risk and reward when approaching a mitigation strategy.
Friction-free purchasing is increasingly important throughout the year, but much more so during these large-scale shopping events when retailers will expect to make quite a large proportion of their profits that they'll make for the year from Black Friday up until the end of Christmas.
When it comes to specifically bot attacks, these are sophisticated, tailored, complex attacks that will be focused on you. They will not be easy to solve. You will need specialist systems to protect yourself from that.
The most impactful thing a customer can do before Black Friday is to communicate with their different teams that are involved in their traffic management, whether that's security or anything else, as to when the key dates will be, what even the key products might be, but really keeping those lines of communication wide open so that updates can be shared, findings can be seen, and that your teams are fully prepped as to what to expect during the event itself.
So I think preparation is everything. And a holistic approach towards security is needed. I think threat intelligence is really key to understand the landscape around your business. And then secondary to that, implementing dynamic toolkits to protect against automated attack. Working with your partners is really key. So ensuring that you lean on your providers' expertise, educate your teams on what to expect and how to appropriately mitigate the risks.
Typically, a lot of threat intel that companies gather is focused very much on cyber threats, and it doesn't focus on business logic attack threats. And as a consequence, the impact of these attacks is significantly underestimated. But if a retailer does decide to actually invest in gathering that sort of intelligence, they can do a lot to actually significantly reduce the impact of these attacks. you need to understand what attackers are going to do against you to be able to counter it specifically ahead of Black Friday.
In order to help customers manage events like Black Friday, all of our models all year round are tuned to respond to those marketing spikes differently than automated traffic spikes. During Black Friday, obviously, there's more of those events, but we tune our models in just the same way to handle that distinction and make sure we're not accidentally blocking legitimate traffic, even though it looks irregular compared to your average Friday.
Revenue generating teams are always going to be a little bit nervous when it comes to security toolkits. It's more of an education piece for the vendors that work with these businesses to ensure that everyone is aware of what the risks are and everyone is comfortable with the steps taken as well.
Post-event analysis, we always do this with our retail customers. It's to really dig deep into the traffic that was observed, do the checkouts, match the numbers of visitors we saw on some of the product pages and so on and so forth. Are there any lessons learned that we can take forward into further seasonal sales? Because, of course, Black Friday, it sort of marks the beginning of the increased levels of traffic during the seasonal period, but it's not the end of it by any means. We've got the whole run up to Christmas and all the other events that happen at the end of the year.